Okay, so let's dive right into the marriage-based green card. How do you get it? What evidence do you need to submit? And what happens if you are married and in the process of, your green card process, your spouse decides to walk away, or your spouse threatens you or abuse you? What do you do? Does it end? Is there another pathway for you to get the green card? These are some of the things we'll be discussing, and I won't take much of your time. It's going to be very brief. So yeah. So generally, a U.S. citizen or a green card holder can file for his or her spouse, no matter where the spouse is, whether here in the U.S. or abroad. Okay, so you don't have to limit yourself because your spouse is abroad. So you won't file for your spouse. You can do that so long as you're a green card holder or U.S. citizen. I recommend being a U.S. citizen to actually file for your spouse because it's quite faster. The green card holder is a little bit slow, so U.S. citizens can file for their spouse no matter where they are. Okay, and you kick the ball rolling by filling out the form I-130. That is what is used to establish the marriage that you have with your spouse. So you start by filling the form I-130 to establish the relationship you have with your spouse. It's going to ask you questions about your spouse. And if you've been married before, you also want to state in there, the form is actually going to ask you whether you've been married before. So you have to establish or demonstrate that, yes, you've been married. That is, if you have and you are no longer married. You can be married to two people at the same time for the purpose of immigration. You can do that. So you have to demonstrate by submitting evidence to show that, one, you are actually married, and two, the person you're filing for, and number two, if you have any previous marriages, you are no longer married, and you can only demonstrate that by submitting divorce or divorce certificate. Okay, so you start applying for your spouse by filling out the form I-130 to establish the relationship that you have. So that is step one. Step two is the adjustment of status. Okay, so the sponsoring spouse is the U.S. citizen, and then the beneficiary spouse is the non-U.S. citizen. I have a problem when people say aliens, so please don't say aliens. Take it from me. It's not cool. Don't say aliens. Just say, and I think the USCIS should change that because the form says petition for alien resident or alien family or something like that. Alien relative. No, just say the non-citizen, non-US citizen spouse. I think that is very cool and respectful. So you start by filing the form I-130, and then subsequently you adjust your status. So the sponsoring spouse does not adjust his or her status. It is the beneficiary spouse that adjusts his or her status. And you are adjusting your status from one visa category to another. So you come into the US with a B1, B2. That's a non-immigrant visa. So you are actually adjusting your status from that category to a different category. So from the non-immigrant to the immigrant. Okay. So you file your adjustment of status if the beneficiary spouse is here in the United States. If the beneficiary spouse is here in the United States, after your I-130 is approved, then you file for the adjustment of status here in the US. And it's not the sponsoring spouse that is filing, it is the beneficiary spouse, if the beneficiary spouse is here in the US. Now you can file both concurrently, meaning you can file it at the same time. I've had people say that it's quite heavy on the pocket to file all the petitions together. So you can actually file the I-130 first, and it's going to take a couple of months because you cannot expedite the I-130. You cannot file the premium processing to expedite it. And so all you have to do is to just wait it out. It's going to take a couple of months. I have seen approval comes in within 4 months. I have seen it coming within 6 months. I have seen I-130 being approved over a year. It all depends on the backlog that the US CIS has. And they always have a backlog. They always do. And so I-130 first, and then I-485 to adjust your status. If you can afford it, you have saved, you've planned towards it, then of course, please file everything concurrently so that when the officer picks your filing packet he has everything in his check, so that you save yourself some time. Okay, so that is that for the I-485, the adjustment of status. If the beneficiary spouse is here in the US. Now, if the beneficiary spouse is not here in the US, that means that it has to go through what we call consular processing. The consular processing, that is when the beneficiary spouse is not in the US. So if the beneficiary spouse is here, right after the I-130 approval is granted, then you move to adjust your status here in the US. But if the beneficiary spouse is not here in the US, that means that it has to go through consular processing. And so the approval, a copy of the approval will be sent to the National Visa Center. The National Visa Center is an agency under the State Department, and the State Department does all consular activities abroad, processing visa. Okay, they take care of everything. The State Department, they deal with consular activities abroad, and there's an agency in the State Department called the National Visa Center. So they process that. They process the immigrant visas, okay, and even non-immigrant visas. They process all consular visas abroad, okay. So once the I-130 is granted, sponsoring spouse is here, beneficiary spouse is abroad, a notice of the approval will be sent to the National Visa Center, and the beneficiary spouse will complete a form called the DS-260 and provide additional information. If they are really married, a lot more documents will have to be uploaded in your system, and they'll check the eligibility of your marriage. How bona fide your marriage is, and then a visa will be granted to you. That is the beneficiary spouse, wherever you are in the world. So once you receive that visa, you come into the US, and then you would go through your phase 3. That is if you are not here. That is when you adjust your status. So remember that if you're here in the US, we establish your relationship by filling out the form I-130. And then when the approval comes and you are in the US, then we adjust your status from whatever category of visa that you had, the non-immigrant visa to the immigrant visa. So we're going to adjust your status if you are here immediately to get your green card. If you're not here, then it will go through consular processing with the National Visa Center. Additional documents will be requested or collected, and then you get a visa. You have to wait for your time, and that's where your priority date comes to play. So I've had a very, very nice time with you, and I look forward to doing this again. Thank you so much for joining. I am very, very grateful to you all for spending your time with me. I look forward to doing it again. Please don't forget to follow our social media pages, and I look forward to seeing you all again. Thank you for joining. I'm very grateful. My name is Akusia Banahini, and thank you all. Thank you.